The Institute for Priestly Formation is proud to present Msgr Frank Lane and his reflections, Receiving Sonship. Msgr Lane serves as spiritual director at the Athenaeum of Ohio, Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Cincinnati, Ohio. The following talk was recorded March 2, 2013, at the 12th Annual Symposium on the Identity of the Diocesan Priest, sponsored by the Institute for Priestly Formation and co-sponsored by the Athenaeum of Ohio, Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Cincinnati. And now, Msgr Lane and his reflection, Receiving Sonship.
Each of us kind of travels our own individual pathways as we seek to follow the Lord. And as I was listening to the presentations, I kept hearing about the beloved sonship and God, the Father, Abba. And I listened to Father Oxley's talk, and I listened to Father Fernandez's talk, and something kept resonating within me, wondering, in this sonship, I recalled in the back of my mind a fundamental position of Joseph Ratzinger, and that was that all revelation is composed of two pieces: God revealing himself to us, and the receiving subject as part of the phenomenon of belief, understanding, and love. And I was thinking on the idea of the receiving subject. If the gift of adoptive sonship is given to us, there is a piece that needs also to be in place. And that piece to be in place is our capacity to receive it. And so God can pour forth grace upon grace. And if we refuse or are incapable of receiving it, then the whole project is half done on the human level. And it brought me back as I thought about that, and certainly when you talk about things like this, obviously we're talking about experiences and reflections in our own lives. We've traveled this road. There are none of us particularly young men at this stage of the game. And so it's been a long road. And I thought back and I thought, where is this? Where is this receptivity? Where do we find this receptivity? And it struck me then also that, and I went back and I place a great deal of reliance on St. Bernard of Clairvaux to explain life to me from time to time. And one of the things that St. Bernard was very clear about, and that was that we are in the image and the likeness of God. And in typical medieval fashion, he divided that up. There is the image, and then there's the likeness. He says the image is the will, and it is unaffected by original sin. And the essence of the will is its freedom. That's what makes it like God. But he said the likeness of God are all the ancillary components of the human person. The intellect, experience, senses, all of those kinds of things. They are corrupted by original sin. So basically, they feed the will bad information from time to time, experientially, intellectually. So the will freely chooses, but it is limited in choosing the good because it doesn't have full knowledge. It doesn't understand the whole thing. I was thinking of that. St. Bernard says then, and this reminded me of Father Fernandez's paper, that St. Bernard says then, well, how do we get out of this? How do we tame the ancillary faculties, the likeness that is corrupted? And Bernard said, by the practice of virtue. He didn't say the goal is to be virtuous, but the practice of virtue heals the damage of sin. And then I thought also of Father Oxley's paper and the image of the scolding father. And I said to myself, that's not universally the case. Some fathers are scolds, and some fathers have bad tempers, and some fathers have good senses of humor, and some have all of those things, and some have none of those things. But the fact of the matter is that each of us are formed in our understanding of the fatherhood of God by our life experience and our primordial life experience of our fathers. And that conditions, for good and for ill, the openness that we have to God, because we filter God's love for us through the prisms of our life experience and our experience of our fathers. A great example, and Father Fernandez and I had talked about this in preparation for this too, use the example of Martin Luther. Luther and his father had about the worst relationship you could imagine. And when Luther, terrified, became a priest, his father was furious, came to his first Mass reception and denounced him for being a bad person, for violating the fourth command because his father had refused to allow him to become a priest. He did it anyway, and he felt he probably had lost his soul, which he announced willingly to the entire gathered assembly at Father Luther's first Mass celebration. Luther never could deal with that. He never could get free of that. He never could find in that relationship with his father any kind of freedom. St. Francis' freedom was, I choose God, and that liberates me. Most of us can't be that absolute. Most of us have to heal those relationships in order for us to be vulnerable to the ultimate relationship with God. Luther's relationship was not one of love. It was one of what we popularly call codependence of some kind, which is anything but love. He never, ever could get free. The result of it was he gave up God as his father and capitulated to his earthly father and destroyed a great deal of his own life in the process, and the lives of many others. This becomes a critical link, I think, in our spiritual life. I had a great father who, believe it or not, probably had faults, which I tended to point out to him from time to time, I'm sure, as he tended to point out mine to me. And the result of it was, I began to understand that my father, as I grew, was not God, but that he had given me tools and experiences that I could relate to the concept of God as Father. And as I began to unravel that, I became also more tolerant of his shortcomings, as I hope he became more tolerant of mine, and I think he did. But the fact of the matter was, it was liberation. It was freedom. And only in that freedom could we ever begin to accept the fact that God also is a father in a very different sort of way, in a way that transcended the limitations of my human relationships. But without those human relationships, I would have never, ever been able to discover the presence of the living God. And I have always tended to believe that our life experience should be labeled Theology 101, because those are the tools that we use to ascend the ladder from a purely material existence into the realm of the pervasive spiritual and incarnate presence of the living God. We learn what it means to love by loving and being loved. The gifts of family, when it works right, the gifts of friendship, all of those things, they are preparing the soul to receive God's gift. They are preparing the soul to discover the grandeur and the wonder of God within the created order, within our own souls, and within the lives of those we know and care about. It is pervasive, and it is personal in the sense that we are present to ourselves always. But if we lock it into the personal alone, then we reconfigure God, and we take away from Him the freedom that we are supposed to emulate in our lives. So I guess my thought is, in reflecting on all of this, are we beloved sons of the Father? Well, of course we are. Insofar as we are united to the Christ. Are we adopted sons of the Father? Of course we are. Insofar as we allow our inner capacity to receive that adoptive grace and power. But that we must grow as human beings in friendship and in truth, so that we can acquire access to that freedom of God's image in us that He has given to us. Without freedom, there is no love. There is dependency, and there is all this codependency business, there's all of that. But without freedom, we cannot love another person. And that freedom does not mean external constraints. It means internal capacity to learn, not necessarily by the force of our wills, to move beyond our pain, but to learn to love that pain and be grateful to those who have given it to us. For in that is the soul healed and the heart opened to the lives of others and to the life of the other, who is the source and the goal of all meaning, of all life, and of everything that is and could ever be and ever will be. And that's what the journey, I think, that each of us is on. And that journey is the one that is able to say to us, embrace your wounds, embrace your pain, and love those who gave it to you, that you might be free of their power, and share that love with others. For in that is your liberation, hopefully their liberation, and in that also is the gateway to the openness of the gifts of God to His children, and certainly in a special way to His priests.